They shoved cake in her face as her granddaughter live-streamed it to strangers. Vivian Marcelli, the matriarch who once paid every circus bill, just dabbed her cheeks. Her son Eli laughed loudest. "She's just the clown now," he said. By morning, she'd pull funding, freeze assets, and call in every legal favor they forgot she had. She wasn't just their mother or their grandmother. She was the foundation they tried to bury. And when the tent fell, she made sure they were the ones beneath it. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The air inside the tent smelled of sawdust, popcorn, and old applause. Vivian Vid. Marcelli stepped over the threshold slowly, letting her eyes adjust to the kaleidoscope lighting that once obeyed her every cue. She wore ivory linen slacks, a silk scarf knotted at her neck, and her signature coral lipstick, dignity pressed into every wrinkle. Overhead, the trapeze cables swayed gently. Below them, a crowd buzzed with champagne and cell phones. "Surprise!" they shouted in unison. Vivian blinked. She already knew, of course. Eli had been too loud on the phone the week before, Tasha too eager on Instagram. But she smiled, measured and graceful, and let the performance begin. Red velvet draped over folding chairs. A vintage photo reel played against the back curtain, her in younger years, mid-flight on a trapeze, arms extended like wings. The applause was artificial, piped in through Bluetooth speakers. Eli took the stage, dressed in an unbuttoned shirt and designer jeans, glass of Prosecco raised high. "Ladies and gentlemen, the original high-wire queen herself. The woman who paid for this tent twice and still won't let us replace the popcorn machine." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Vivian folded her hands over her clutch and tilted her chin up. Eli went on. "She taught us how to fly, how to fall, and how to balance a checkbook midair. And now, at 70 years young, our family's very own grand clown." Then he did it. He picked up the oversized sheet cake, lemon chiffon with red trim, and shoved a full handful into her face. There was a gasp, followed by a louder burst of laughter. Vivian didn't react. She reached for the napkin, offered by a stagehand, and dabbed her mouth, careful not to smear her lipstick. Tasha filmed it all from her seat. "Clown Queen," she captioned, posting before Vivian had even stood up. "Smile, Nana," Tasha called. Vivian did. Thinly. The cake was too sweet. The laughter too loud. She glanced across the ring. Luca stood near the cotton candy cart, jaw tight, hands buried in his jacket. When their eyes met, he mouthed, "I'm sorry." Vivian gave him the smallest nod. It was enough. After the crowd dispersed, after the champagne dulled the edge of cruelty, Camila Reyes appeared beside her like a shadow cast by instinct. "You okay?" she asked, her voice low. Vivian took off her gloves, folding them neatly. "Why wouldn't I be?" Camila's eyes scanned the dimming lights. "Because they wanted to humiliate you. And they think you didn't notice." Vivian shrugged. "I was born on stage. It takes more than frosting to bring me down." Camila touched her elbow. They're planning something. Bigger." Vivian turned toward her, slow, deliberate. "How big?" "Big enough that they're hiding paperwork. Big enough that you weren't meant to live past last spring." There was a silence between them then. Not of shock, but of confirmation. Vivian reached up and wiped a smudge of frosting from her brow. "They forget," she said softly. "I taught them the act." Camila exhaled through her nose. "Then maybe it's time you take back the ring." Vivian turned to look out at the tent, empty now but echoing. She walked into the center of the ring, one step at a time, letting the memory of her own footsteps guide her. From the rafters the spotlight flickered once, weak but not dead. She lifted her chin, just slightly, because the trick wasn't surviving the fall. It was remembering when to land. The sun had barely crested the palms when Vivian stepped into Daniel Vaughn's law office. He was already waiting, tie loosened, reading glasses perched low, coffee gone cold, beside a pile of documents that hadn't existed in her consciousness yesterday. He stood when she entered, like always. Vivian, Daniel. She removed her gloves slowly, carefully. Let's see it. He motioned to the polished oak table. On it sat two thick manila folders, an iPad, and her old embossed leather binder, something she hadn't touched since before her stroke. I pulled everything, he said. From the day you and Leo registered the LLC, to the last amendment signed before his passing. His handwriting was pristine. Vivian ran a finger over Leo's signature, flourished, slanted right, confident. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. Where's Eli's name? Daniel flipped pages. It isn't. Not until this. He turned the iPad toward her. On screen was a digital document titled Marcelli Circus, Operating Agreement Addendum. The signature next to hers was recent, dated 3 months after her stroke. A neat, stylized e-signature she didn't recognize. Daniel. Her voice didn't rise. That isn't mine. He nodded. I compared it to your known e-signs. It's a forgery. The IP address traces back to a tablet registered under Tasha's maiden name. The timing is not subtle. Vivian's hands didn't shake, but her breath did something quieter, shortened, compressed. He called himself executive managing partner in this. Daniel continued. It's not a real title under your LLC framework, but it carries the illusion of control. Vivian stared out the window. Across the street, a mother held her daughter's hand, skipping into a bakery. For a moment, Vivian remembered holding Eli that way, before legacy became currency. Keep digging, she said, rising. Quietly. By noon, the circus grounds were loud with rehearsals. Costumes flapped from drying lines, performers stretched in the sun, and someone was testing the speakers, with the same outdated trumpet riff on loop. Vivian moved through it like a shadow in pearls, unnoticed but knowing everything. Backstage, she passed the prop trunk, paint peeling, hinges rusted, and paused. A slip of yellowed paper peeked from beneath a coil of old juggling scarves. She bent down. It was an envelope, her name typed on the front. Inside 3 months of backlogged tax notices, addressed to her, never opened. Luca's voice came from behind. I found it yesterday. Meant to tell you. She turned slowly. He looked equal parts guilt and urgency. They were stuffed under the foam swords, he said. I thought they were stage bills. Vivian held the envelope to her chest like a relic. You did well, she said. Keep your eyes open. Later that evening, Tasha posted a photo to Instagram. A filtered snapshot of herself in a crimson blazer, standing next to Eli under the main tent archway. Caption, grateful for the dreamers who built this, and the future owners ready to elevate it. #family legacy #next gen circus. Vivian saw it as she stirred her tea. The lighting in the photo had been edited to make her own portrait, faded on the marquee behind them, barely visible. She smiled. Not out of bitterness, but because miscalculations made the best leverage. She tapped a few keys on her laptop, her fingers surprisingly nimble, and opened her contacts. Lily, I need a discreet financial auditor, someone who understands performance nonprofits and silence. Then she opened her calendar. Monday, 9 a.m., begin the audit. At midnight, she sat in her office, with the door cracked open, letting the Florida breeze carry in smells of citrus and warm pavement. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, then moved with purpose. Subject line, Marcelli operating rights, reconciliation inquiry attached. Daniel's screenshot of the forged signature. She hit send. Then she opened a new folder on her desktop. She titled it, The Reclamation, because she hadn't walked the tightrope for 30 years to be pushed off now. The circus grounds were quieter now, the kind of silence that settled after betrayal. Vivian moved slowly between the tents, her shoes soft against the trampled grass. A peacock feather drifted past her ankles, left behind from someone's costume. She paused at the center ring. No lights, no music, just outlines of where the trapeze once swung, where Leo had stood with his hands on his hips and a dream in his chest. Her palm traced the rusted steel frame that had once held the ticket booth. She remembered the day it arrived in pieces, delivered from a retired train station in Ohio. She and Leo had painted it red themselves, sweating through the July heat, laughing when the paint bled into their sleeves. They hadn't had a blueprint, just trust. And now the grounds felt foreign, gentrified with LED rigging and chrome signage that glared instead of glowed. She kept walking. A white tent had been set up near the performance platform, sleek, air-conditioned, with rented folding chairs arranged in perfect arcs. A hand-painted banner read, "Circus of the Future, Vision Launch with Eli Marcelli." Vivian stood at the back of the crowd, arms crossed. Eli took the mic like he owned it, tan, tailored, dripping with performative ease. "Thank you all for being here. The circus has always been about awe, about wonder, but it's time we move into a new chapter, a modern one. One with transparent ownership, strategic growth, and yes, fresh faces leading the charge." The crowd clapped. Tasha filmed from the side, nodding like a backup dancer. Eli gestured grandly toward a rendering of a redesigned tent behind him. It looked like a Vegas showroom with circus wallpaper. And none of this would be possible without the generosity of my family, especially the founding contributions of my mother, Vivian Marcelli. A spotlight turned toward the back. Vivian didn't flinch. She didn't smile, either. She simply nodded. Eli didn't make eye contact. He kept going. "Today we don't just honor the past, we redesign it." The county assessor's office smelled like dust and copier toner. Vivian sat patiently across from a clerk named Harold, who kept blinking at her like he couldn't quite believe who had walked in. "I'm just here for a public record," she said, placing a handwritten parcel ID on the counter. He typed for several minutes, then squinted at the screen. This was just updated 2 weeks ago. Ownership listed as Marcelli Holdings LLC, managing partner, Eli Marcelli. Vivian's voice was smooth. "And who filed the change?" Harold hesitated. "Digitally, under power of attorney." "Who signed it?" Another pause. He turned the monitor slightly. Vivian saw the signature. It was hers. Or close enough to fool a tired bureaucrat. She nodded. "Print that for me, please." He did. She folded the copy carefully, slid it into her bag, and walked out without another word. Camila found her back at the bungalow, staring at the document with a tea she hadn't touched. "They think you've already surrendered," Camila said, leaning in the doorway, "like you've accepted this as some parting gesture." Vivian's jaw flexed. "That's because they think the act is over." "It's not?" Vivian looked up. "Oh no, darling. It's just the costume change." She picked up her phone and opened a new message. To Luca message, witness. She hit send. The reply came 10 minutes later. Dropbox link. Power of attorney. Revoked. Vivian opened it slowly. There, in clean digital scans, was the notarized revocation she'd filed months ago, tucked away by Daniel during her recovery. Quietly certified. Quietly legal. No fanfare. No announcements. Just power. Retracted. She leaned back in her chair. For the first time in weeks, her smile reached both corners of her mouth. Because illusions only worked until the curtain dropped. And Vivian had built the tent. The cafe was too new for comfort. Steel chairs, cement floors, plants in jars. Vivian preferred the old diners, the kind with cracked booths and sugar packets stacked like currency. But the man she was meeting had chosen this place, and Vivian knew better than to argue with arrogance when it could be leveraged. Across the table, Grant Beller, the land developer, with a LinkedIn smile and tech startup haircut, checked his watch without apology. "I'm surprised you wanted to meet," he said, sipping his green juice like it held more equity than flavor. "I assumed your son briefed you on the transition." Vivian smiled politely. "He briefed me on his version. I'd like to hear yours." Grant leaned back, folding his arms. "Well, it's straightforward. We're acquiring the South Lot tent grounds, training annex, and merch pavilion. Eli's consolidating the brand. More vertical integration. Cleaner ownership model. Cleaner. Vivian's tone stayed silk smooth. Tell me, did Eli present proof of equity stake when he approached you? Grant blinked. He had signatory authority through POA. That's standard. Was that all? He hesitated. Look, Miss Marcelli, he said the shares were family-owned, that you'd stepped back due to health issues. He implied this was legacy succession. I took him at his word. Vivian leaned forward just enough to close the gap between politeness and precision. Then let me correct the record. I'm not dead, I'm not dizzy, and I never ceded ownership. The shares he referenced, not his to promise. And the property you're eyeing, still held under my name, registered, recorded, and soon to be moved beyond his reach. Grant paled a little, color draining beneath his year-round tan. Are you threatening to sue? No, Mr. Beller. I'm simply clarifying your next press release, because the one Eli drafts may not age well. An hour later, Camila met Vivian at a storage facility on the edge of Sarasota, tucked behind a bait shop and a faded dog grooming van. Unit 212, code 1953. Inside one safe, 3 trunks, a file cabinet, and a velvet-lined box that had once held Vivian's wedding shoes. Camila popped the safe, while Vivian unfolded a canvas pouch from her handbag. Original title, Camila muttered, scanning the seal. Dated, signed, notarized. Still under VM, no co-owner. You've been very thorough. Vivian smiled faintly. The tightrope teaches you balance, but the net, that teaches you backup. She slid the documents into a reinforced envelope and zipped her purse with the calm of someone setting a chessboard mid-check. By 3 p.m., she was seated in the offices of Rivera Trust and Estates. I'd like to begin transfer of all circus-related holdings into an irrevocable structure, she told the paralegal. Beneficiary to be named. Trustee, myself only. No proxies. As she signed, the door behind her creaked open slightly. A flash of coral lipstick and gold aviators passed by. Tasha. Vivian didn't turn her head. She just signed the final page with deliberate flourish. The kind of signature you remember when you're holding a copy in court. At dusk, the tent glowed like a jewel. Stage lights on. Dancers rehearsing. Acrobats mid-flight. Vivian entered through the staff flap, dressed in slate gray, pearls at her throat, every inch composed. Eli stood near the concession rack, arms crossed. Tasha beside him, phone already in hand. You were at Rivera's, Eli said without preamble. Vivian removed her gloves one finger at a time. Indeed. You're not well enough to handle this kind of change. Then consider it practice for how sharp I'll be on a good day. Tasha's smile didn't reach her eyes. You're making a mistake. Vivian looked at her. I've survived broken ribs, torn ligaments, and 23 curtain calls with fire brothers too drunk to aim. I know what a mistake looks like. You two, you're just math I haven't finished subtracting yet. Eli opened his mouth, but she walked past them, unbothered. She paused only once, at the edge of the ring, tilting her head to catch the music swelling above the tent. The act wasn't over, but the spotlight was shifting. The letter arrived folded in thirds, couriered by a stiff young man with gelled hair and a clipboard. Vivian didn't open it until after he left. She read it once at the kitchen counter, twice again at her desk, and a third time out loud, just to hear how betrayal sounded when dressed in legalese. Petition for emergency guardianship. Filed by Eli Marcelli, citing age-related cognitive decline, stroke history, and erratic financial behavior. Vivian laid the letter flat, hands steady. Outside, the sprinkler hissed across her hydrangeas, and the neighbor's chihuahua yapped like clockwork. It was all so ordinary, but inside her chest, something flared. Not panic. Precision. She reached for the phone. Daniel, we've got movement. 2 days later, Vivian sat across from a doctor in a pale blue suit and sneakers that didn't match. Dr. Jensen specialized in geriatric psychiatric assessments. He asked her to count backward from 100 by sevens. He asked her to name animals that start with kiss. He asked her who the current president was. She answered with grace and bite. Also, she added at the end, I can still tie a full corset blindfolded. That should count for something. The doctor chuckled. I've seen a lot of people in this chair, Miss Marcelli. You're not confused. You're sharp. Vivian raised an eyebrow. Sharp enough to spot a con dressed as concern. Sharper, he replied, signing the form with a flourish. Much sharper. Back at the grounds, Camila kept her ears open like a fox in pearls. In the green room trailer, between costume fittings and mic checks, she heard it. Tasha, in full glam, phone in one hand, mimosa in the other, talking to a makeup girl too young to know better. If she's crazy, we win it all, Tasha said, laughing. Camila didn't flinch. She just clicked her pen twice, activating the voice memo recorder in her purse. Repeat that for me, she asked, stepping into the trailer. Tasha spun around. What? Camila smiled with teeth. Oh, nothing. Just wanted to hear the punchline again. Vivian played the audio for Daniel over lunch. He didn't say much, just pushed his club sandwich aside and opened his laptop. I'll file an injunction today, he said. Until this mess is resolved, no one moves money, property, or positions. Period. Vivian sipped her iced tea. Make sure the injunction lands before Eli's afternoon golf tea time. I want him notified while he's holding a driver. That evening, Eli stormed into the bungalow like he still paid the mortgage. You think this blocks me? He barked. You're making this ugly. Vivian turned from the stovetop, spoon in hand. I'm not making it ugly. You did that with forged signatures and a stolen title. Tasha hovered in the doorway, thumb twitching over her screen. Eli stepped forward. You can't run this circus anymore. Everyone sees it. Vivian tilted her head. I walked a tightrope, blindfolded at 50 feet above ground, during a windstorm, in heels. You think I'm scared of court? He opened his mouth. She raised her hand. No, you've had your monologue. Now I get mine. Behind her, Camila entered quietly with a folder. Inside was a notarized statement. Luca's sworn testimony. Witness account. Details of Eli coaching a staffer to push the narrative that Nana wasn't stable. Vivian handed it to Eli, with the poise of a performer who knew her cues. Tasha's eyes flicked to the document, then to the exit. You're bluffing, Eli said. No, Vivian replied. I'm balancing. Later in the still of her bedroom, Vivian sat at her vanity, unpinning her hair. Her reflection was soft but sure. Silver strands, coral lipstick, no need for extra armor. Her phone buzzed. Luca, court granted the injunction. They can't touch a dime, she smiled, then looked at the manila envelope on her nightstand labeled, Plan B, if they push again, because she knew Eli. And this wasn't the fall, it was just the tilt before the drop. The elephants were long gone, sold years back when the Marcelli Circus modernized its ethics and swapped tradition for compliance. But the phrase still lingered, whispered in tents and trailers whenever something big and dangerous was looming. And today, the danger was payroll. Vivian felt it the moment she stepped on the lot, tension humming beneath every rig, rope, and rusted food cart. Performers stretched with stiffness. Trainers muttered behind half-zipped tents, and no one looked Eli in the eye. Camila met her by the popcorn stand. They haven't been paid in 2 weeks. Vivian's brows lifted. I saw the treasury statements. He's been moving money. Not to them. That afternoon, behind the old animal arena, now a break area with hammocks and fans, dozens of workers gathered. Jugglers, stagehands, spotlight operators. No one wore their show face. Vivian stepped up on a crate, clasped her hands behind her back, and scanned the crowd. Her coral lipstick gleamed in the heat. Her pearls didn't move. I hear you're tired, she said, that you're hungry, that you're being told to wait for funds that never come. Murmurs of confirmation rippled through the group. Well, she continued, voice calm but clipped. I founded this circus with a man who used to say, the tent falls if one rope breaks. You are those ropes, and I will not let you snap without being heard. The silence that followed was not from fear, but attention. Vivian reached into her tote and pulled out a sheaf of papers. "This is my bank," she said. "This account is in my name only. Effective immediately, every worker who signs in tonight gets paid. Your names, your hours, not funneled through anyone else." Someone clapped, then another. Camila stepped forward with her iPad, and for those who want to see where the old money went, she tapped the screen. Charts, transfers. One labeled Executive Lounge Renovation, $22,000. A man in stilts whistled. "There ain't even a lounge." Vivian looked at them all. "If he can find $22,000 for mahogany chairs, I can find it for your rent." The clapping turned to cheers. Inside the costume tent, the heat was thick with hairspray and sequins. Yvette, a contortionist known for her silence, sat applying eyeliner in the mirror when Tasha slid in, all faux casual and Gucci perfume. "You know," Tasha purred, "it's getting worse with her." Vivian, forgetting things, repeating herself. "You might want to speak up about it, for your safety." Yvette said nothing. Tasha leaned in. "Of course, anyone who helps us get ahead in this situation might find themselves elevated, like assistant headliner status." She smiled, dropped a 20 on the vanity, and swanned out. Yvette stared at the bill, then picked it up and walked. Vivian was in her bungalow garden when the knock came. She opened the door to find Yvette, still in stage makeup, eyes solemn. "She tried to pay me to lie about you," Yvette said quietly. Vivian didn't blink. "What did you say?" "I said no." "Why?" Yvette hesitated. "Years ago, my sister tried out for the junior aerial team." She froze mid-climb, started crying. "I remember," Vivian said softly. "You didn't laugh. You didn't let them laugh. You helped her down yourself." Vivian swallowed. "You once saved her." "I don't forget." That night, under a sky full of clouds trying not to rain, Vivian watched the tent pulse with light. The show must go on. It always did, but this time, the audience wasn't the only one watching. Her inbox pinged. Subject: anonymous tip attachment. Screenshot of an internal Slack message. Sender: blocked. It read, "She's getting too much traction. Time to finish what we started." Sent from tashamarcelli.admin. Vivian read it once, then again. Then she picked up the red folder labeled Plan B. If they push again, and slid the message inside. Because now it wasn't just fraud, it was war. The sewing tent still smelled like stage dust and mothballs, like generations of ambition stitched into velvet. Vivian stepped inside quietly, alone. Bolts of fabric leaned in corners like forgotten guards. Spools of thread lined the shelves like soldiers waiting for battle. She ran her hand over the old Singer machine, fingers brushing metal worn smooth from years of applause. It had once been her sanctuary. Her second act was born right here, after Leo died, after she took over the ledgers, after she stitched together a brand with nothing but glitter and grit. Now it would be her war room. She pulled open the bottom drawer. The patterns were still there, tucked beneath old receipts and faded photographs. Her ringmaster suit, blood red with gold piping, high collar, double-buttoned waist. It had taken her 60 hours to sew the first time. She began again, one pin at a time. Meanwhile, Luca crouched beneath the bleachers, rifling through a plastic bin labeled Archives. Do not purge. Dust stung his nose. At the bottom, beneath an old juggling club and a broken megaphone, he found a yellowed newspaper clipping from 1987. Vivian Marcelli named most innovative circus financier, the woman balancing ledgers and high-wire dreams. Her photo beamed beside the headline. Hair teased high, blazer sharp, gaze defiant. He tucked the article into his satchel and started walking, fast. 3 nights later, the marquee lights flickered on for a sold-out benefit show. Tourists filed in with candy-striped bags and folding fans. Popcorn popped in bursts. Music swelled. And then the spotlight hit the ring entrance. Vivian stepped through the curtain. Gasps swept the tent. She wore the suit. Not a replica. The suit, tailored to her current figure, gracefully aged, deliberately powerful. Her boots shined like resolve. Her lipstick was war paint red. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She simply walked, one foot in front of the other, to center ring and stood. A beat passed. Then applause erupted. The standing kind, from the crew, from the audience, from the rope riggers leaning out of scaffolds. Eli stood frozen by the curtain, jaw flexing. Investors flanked him, their smiles politely dissolving. Camila appeared behind him, arms folded. "Didn't you say she was stepping down?" one investor whispered. Eli swallowed. "It's a costume. Symbolic. Nothing binding." Vivian turned slowly to face the crowd. Her voice echoed without mic or cue. "I built this tent when the ground was still gravel. I signed the first loan while 6 months pregnant. And I watched my husband fly into every stunt knowing he'd land because I balanced every number behind him." She pulled a worn paper from her inner jacket pocket and held it up. "The founding documents still bear my name." Another round of applause. Camila leaned into the investor group, smile sharp. "If you're wondering who actually holds the reins, check the IRS registry. Or better, come to our emergency board meeting." "Board meeting?" Eli turned to her. "Who called that?" "I did," Camila replied. "As majority vote proxy, Vivian and I are requesting an emergency review of leadership protocol and ownership disclosures." Vivian's voice boomed again. "We fly, we fall. But this circus doesn't forget who sewed the net." The spotlight dimmed slightly, her cue to exit. She bowed once, low and clean. Backstage, Eli spun to Tasha. "Did you know about the meeting?" "She blindsided us," Tasha hissed. "That suit was strategic. She's reclaiming optics." From the rafters, Luca filmed everything on his phone. At the bungalow, the dining room table had transformed into a fortress of paperwork. Manila folders. Receipts yellowed with time. Every permit, every wire transfer, every year of tax filings. Camila moved like a general, sorting evidence. Vivian adjusted her reading glasses and pulled a thick red binder from the bottom of the stack. Her handwriting looped across the label. "Marcelli Circus, year 1 to now." She flipped to the first page. A faded invoice, signed by Leo, stamped paid. Camila set down the final stack. "Ready?" Vivian closed the binder gently. "I was born ready," but just as she reached for her pen, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Cancel the meeting or the stories we've collected on you go public." Vivian stared at the screen, expression unreadable. Then she slid the phone into her purse without a word. Because threats only work on people still afraid to fall. And Vivian had already landed. The courtroom smelled of lemon cleaner and tension. Vivian stood just inside the door, letting the space take her in. Her blazer was red, not just red, but ringmaster red, tailored, structured. A collar that kissed her jawline. A silent nod to the stage she once commanded. People turned. The reporters in the last row paused their whispers. Even the bailiff blinked twice. She walked with purpose, heels quiet but confident, each step a drumbeat. Eli sat at the plaintiff's table, jaw tight, tie askew. Tasha was beside him, draped in beige and nerves, scrolling her phone like salvation could be refreshed. Daniel leaned toward Vivian. "Judge is tough, but thorough." Vivian didn't smile. "Good. So am I." They were barely 5 minutes into the hearing when Tasha rose, voice trembling with performative indignation. "Your Honor, this isn't a hearing. It's a coup. Miss Marcelli is manipulating vulnerable employees, creating chaos with outdated documentation, and coercing my husband into silence." Vivian didn't even blink. Tasha pointed. "She's parading around like she's still relevant, when the entire team knows she's mentally declining." "Enough," the judge said. But Daniel stood. "Permission to enter evidence." "Your Honor?" "Granted." He plugged in a flash drive. The screen behind the bench flickered to life. "Audio first," Tasha's voice. If she's crazy, we win it all. Then video, Camila's cell phone recording. Tasha laughing, mimosa in hand, talking about how easy it is to flip an old lady narrative. Dead silence. The judge leaned back slowly. Tasha flushed scarlet. That was taken out of context. It was taken in your own trailer. Camila called from the gallery. The judge held up a hand. Miss Marcelli, do you have anything to say before I render next steps? Vivian stood. No theatrics, Your Honor. Just facts. She reached into her leather brief and placed a small stack on the bench. A timeline of ownership, notarized board votes, and a psychiatric evaluation certifying I'm cognitively above average for my age. Which, respectfully, is more than I can say for the fiscal decisions being made by the opposing party. Daniel added, we're also requesting a forensic financial review of all accounts linked to Marcelli Holdings LLC past 18 months. The judge flipped through a few pages. The injunction remains paused, he said, but I will not rule until this review is complete. 10 business days. In that time, no financial transactions, asset transfers, or structural changes are permitted by either party. Understood. Eli nodded stiffly. Vivian dipped her head. Barely. The gavel tapped once. Court recessed. Outside, flashbulbs popped. The Sarasota press hadn't seen a circus story this juicy since a juggler married a fire eater on the high wire. Camila moved through them with purpose, voice clear and measured. Vivian Marcelli is not just the founder of this legacy, she is its spine. And we will not let her be erased under the guise of modernization. A young journalist stepped forward. Is it true she paid out of pocket to fund staff salaries last month? Camila raised an eyebrow. It's true she still believes in loyalty. Can Eli say the same? Behind her, Tasha pulled on sunglasses and disappeared into a waiting SUV. Vivian stood slightly apart, watching it unfold. Luca approached quietly, holding a to-go cup and her press badge. You okay? He asked. Vivian took the badge. Never better. He hesitated. They're trying to spin you as relic. A relic with receipts, but still. Vivian smiled, slow and sharp. Let them spin, she said. They'll trip over it soon enough. That evening, Vivian sat beneath a string of patio lights at the bungalow. Camila poured wine. Daniel reviewed his notes. Luca scrolled headlines on his phone. Vivian unfolded a single sheet of paper and laid it on the table. I want the circus turned into a cooperative trust. No one should hold what can be earned together. Daniel raised his eyebrows. You sure? Vivian nodded. Legacy doesn't expire, but ownership? That can evolve. Before anyone could reply, Luca's phone buzzed. He looked down, then looked up, eyes wide. Vivian, you need to see this. He turned the screen toward her. A video, posted from a burner account. A younger Vivian, half-dressed backstage, shouting orders, papers in hand. The caption read, "This is who she really is. #exposed the ringmaster." Vivian's smile didn't fade. She just whispered, "Let them come," because she knew the rhythm of performance. And this act was just entering center ring. The sky above Sarasota burned coral and lavender as Vivian stepped into the quiet office of a small real estate firm on Palm Avenue. Nothing flashy, a framed marlin on the wall, a receptionist too absorbed in a crossword to glance up. Perfect. The man waiting at the desk, Mr. Pike, looked like he hadn't shaved since the 90s. He stood when she entered. Miss Ross, he greeted her, using the alias they'd agreed on. Vivian smiled, serene. Let's keep this quick. Over the next 30 minutes, the deed to the training annex, the back lot, and the costume warehouse passed back under Marcelli control, only now held by Silver Spire Productions LLC, a corporate entity built discreetly by Daniel over late-night phone calls and airtight proxies. Sign here to finalize the title transfers, Pike said, handing her the pen. Vivian signed without hesitation. Her signature was clean. Final. In the cellar? She asked casually. Pike checked the folder. Marcelli Holdings LLC. Some guy named Eli negotiated the deal. Vivian's lips curved faintly. Tell him. Miss Ross's sends her regards. Back at the bungalow, Luca sat at his laptop. 3 screens open, coffee half drunk beside him. He scrolled through IP logs, server redirects, and overlapping registration dates. His fingers moved faster with every layer of shell company unmasked. Got him, he muttered. Camila looked up from the receipts she'd been sorting. How bad? 3 dummy accounts, 2 untraceable payment processors, and all routing back to a Delaware firm called SunTrack Visions. Daniel appeared in the doorway. SunTrack's been flagged in 3 financial fraud cases. If Eli funneled investor funds through that shell, then we have enough, Vivian said, stepping inside. Send it. Daniel nodded and opened a secure line with the Financial Crimes Division. The board met 3 days later, under fluorescent lights and pressed nerves. Vivian entered last, Camila beside her in a navy blazer and war-ready smile. Eli was already seated, surrounded by blank-faced executives, trying not to be seen nodding. Tasha's chair was conspicuously empty, replaced by a laminated note that read, "Access suspended pending investigation." A board member named Stewart cleared his throat. Due to pending audit findings and the conflict of interest disclosures we received from legal counsel this morning, the question before us is simple. He turned to the table. Do we reinstate founding leadership under emergency authority? Vivian didn't speak. She didn't need to. The votes came down, one by one. Yes, 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 yes. Eli stood. You people don't understand. She's past her prime. You want a museum, not a movement. No, Camila said coolly. We want accountability. And you just failed the act. The security guards were quiet. Professional. They gave Eli 30 minutes to pack. He threw a fit anyway, knocking over a chair, cursing under his breath. Tasha watched from the gravel lot, her face unreadable. She didn't help him. Vivian stood on the platform, where the strong men used to pose, watching it unfold. Daniel joined her. You're officially interim CEO. She didn't smile, but she nodded. And Camila? ACO. Effective immediately. She turned to Camila. You always said the net didn't belong to one performer. Camila placed a hand over her heart. Now we make sure it never does again. That evening, a new sign went up beside the entrance arch. Marcelli Cooperative. Built to fly, bound to no one. Vivian stood below it, watching the spotlight sweep across the lettering. Luca handed her his phone. Check the comments. She scrolled through post after post under the hashtag #ringmasterreturns. She saved the circus again. Founders fraudsters. Legacy beats rebranding. But as she handed it back, something tugged at the edges of her piece. Eli's gone quiet, Luca said. Vivian narrowed her eyes. Too quiet. Camila approached with a thick envelope. It's from the lawyers. Vivian opened it. Inside, a cease and desist, filed not by Eli, but by a new counsel, one tied to a private media group, now claiming ownership of decades' worth of archived footage, creative rights, and branding associated with the Marcelli name. Vivian inhaled, slow and sharp. Because sometimes snakes didn't slither away. They shed their skin and came back louder. The studio lights were softer than the ones she'd known under the tent, but they warmed her just the same. Vivian sat poised in a slate blue armchair, microphone clipped to her lapel, eyes focused, spine straight. The camera blinked red. Across from her, the host of Bayview Spotlight smiled too widely. We're here with Vivian Marcelli, founder, performer, and recently reinstated CEO of the Marcelli Cooperative. Vivian, thank you for joining us. Vivian returned the smile with practiced precision. Happy to be here, especially under my own name. Laughter from the crew behind the cameras. The host blushed slightly. Let's talk about the headlines, he said. Fraud allegations, boardroom battles, a son turned adversary. How did you keep going? Vivian folded her hands in her lap, one ring gleaming under the lights. You don't spend decades on a tightrope without learning balance. When the rope shakes, you don't flinch. You adjust. And when family betrays you, she didn't pause. You forgive what's honest. You correct what's malicious. And sometimes, correction looks a lot like court orders. The interview aired at 8 p.m. sharp. By 8:17, the clip had already been posted by the American Circus Preservation League with the caption, "Marcelli isn't just a legacy, she's a master class in endurance." By 9 o'clock, the International Performance Federation reposted it with a single word, respect. Across town, Eli sat in a rental condo with blackout curtains and half-packed boxes. The TV was muted, but the news chyron ran anyway. Ringmaster reclaims her throne. He threw his phone at the wall, then picked up another. File it, he snapped. Defamation. Libel. Emotional distress. I don't care. His lawyer, young and overconfident, filed the motion the next morning. The hearing lasted 11 minutes. The judge skimmed the documents, looked at Vivian's media appearances, and dismissed the claim without comment. Eli barely made it out of the courthouse before local press caught wind of the failed suit. Tasha was more careful. She still hosted her podcast, The Next Act, though episodes had thinned since Vivian's reinstatement. She recorded a new teaser anyway. Just because someone wears pearls doesn't mean they're clean, she said, voice honey slick. We'll talk legacies, lies, and what it means when icons refuse to let go. The episode never aired. Her two biggest sponsors, an energy drink company and a boutique PR firm, pulled out the morning her name appeared in the financial mismanagement audit. By noon, her agent stopped answering texts. Vivian didn't respond publicly. She didn't have to. That same week, she launched a podcast of her own. Under the Big Sky, Notes from a Survivor. The intro music was slow and brass-heavy, like something from a closing act. The first episode began with her voice, steady and familiar. I was once told that a ringmaster never breaks character. But the truth is, sometimes you have to, because survival isn't a performance. It's a choice, and I chose to stay standing. Within 48 hours, she trended under #BigSkyNotes. Within 72, NPR requested a guest interview. At the bungalow, Luca handed her a set of analytics, with wide eyes. You're averaging 78,000 listeners an episode. Vivian stirred her tea without looking up. Not bad for a relic. Camilla popped her head in. Not a relic, a ringleader. Vivian grinned. And what's next for the tent? We finalize the co-op next week. The performers voted, full equity model approved. Vivian nodded, the weight of the decades behind her softening in her shoulders. But only slightly. Good, she said. Because if I've learned anything, it's that they'll always come for your spotlight when they can't make their own. That night, as the circus lights twinkled in the distance, and the ocean breeze pressed against the windows, Vivian opened a padded envelope that had arrived earlier. Inside, a USB drive. No label, no return address. She inserted it into her laptop. Pulse even. The screen blinked to life. Static. Then footage. Old, grainy. Someone had been filming from backstage, Vivian at a rehearsal decades ago, arguing with Leo. But the audio was edited. Twisted. Spliced. Her voice layered over itself, making her sound harsh. Manipulative. A woman unfit to lead. The file ended with a black screen and one sentence in red. Not over yet. Vivian leaned back, her jaw tight, because they weren't trying to take her circus anymore. They were trying to rewrite her story. The knock on Eli's temporary condo door came at 7:14 a.m., unforgiving in uniform. He opened it in pajama pants and a crumpled designer hoodie, blinking against the early light. Eli Marcelli. Two agents stood shoulder to shoulder, jackets crisp, badges out. We have a warrant for your arrest under Title 18, wire fraud, tax evasion, and financial misrepresentation under a nonprofit corporate charter. Eli sputtered. You've got the wrong, sir, step back. By the time the cuffs clicked, a neighbor had stepped out with her Yorkshire Terrier. Eli was in the back of the cruiser before his lawyer could return his call. At the bungalow, Vivian sipped her coffee black. She didn't flinch when Luca burst in with his phone. It's confirmed. Arrested this morning. They're freezing his remaining accounts. Vivian set her mug down gently. The universe has timing. That same afternoon, Camilla stood center ring, a microphone in one hand and a clipboard in the other. Over 200 performers and crew members filled the tent bleachers, trapeze artists, clowns, sound engineers, costume techs, the animal-free stunt team. Today she began, voice amplified but warm. You vote for yourselves. The overhead screens lit up with slides, profit-sharing tiers, board rotation schedules, equity allocations. The Marcelli Cooperative Trust will be performer-governed, legacy-aligned, and structurally transparent. A hand went up from the spotlight booth. What about touring regions? Aimel and Fars and the spotlight booth. Camila smiled. Rotated, voted, decided by you. Vivian sat in the front row, pearls gleaming, hands folded in her lap. She said nothing. She didn't have to. They were standing in her legacy, rewired, rewoven, and now, democratically, run. Tasha didn't attend. That morning, her attorney filed paperwork at the Sarasota County Courthouse, divorce petition, last name restoration, and a request for media privacy. By evening, her podcast accounts were locked. By midnight, she was photographed boarding a flight to Arizona under her maiden name. The caption on the blurry TMZ image read, "Fallen PR queen flees after circus scandal." Vivian saw it. Didn't smile. Didn't speak. She simply opened her laptop and moved a calendar appointment forward. The circus grounds glowed golden under the setting sun. Long tables were set up between trailers for a town hall celebration. Picnic benches, glass pitchers of lemonade, plates of sugar-dusted funnel cake. As the crew gathered, Luca stood on a makeshift platform, microphone in hand, nerves fluttering beneath his collar. My name is Luca Marcelli. I'm a fourth-generation performer, and until recently, I thought legacy was just something you inherited, something that came wrapped in fame and stress and expectation. He glanced toward Vivian, whose eyes held steady on him. But legacy, he continued, is something you build with truth, with sweat, with your name in ink, not someone else's lie. Applause rose in waves. I watched someone I love get buried by the same people who once called her family. And I watched her rise again, not with rage, but with records, with receipts, with grace. He raised a paper cup of cider, to integrity, and to never mistaking age for weakness. They toasted. The crew clapped. Someone lit a sparkler. Vivian reached for Camila's hand, squeezing once, firm. He thought I'd be too old to fight, she whispered. Camila's eyes gleamed. He thought wrong. Later that night, the tent emptied out like a heartbeat slowing after adrenaline. Moonlight spilled through the top flap. Vivian stood alone at center ring. The canvas beneath her feet was faded in spots, patched with years, mended by memory. She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Leo's first blueprint sketch. The edges had worn thin, the pencil lines soft from touch. She laid it flat on the ring floor. Tomorrow would bring headlines, meetings, reconstruction. But tonight, she stood in the exact center of what they'd built and let herself exhale. Just once. Then the lights above flickered. 3 quick flashes. Not a malfunction. A signal. Vivian turned slowly toward the sound. Footsteps. Deliberate. Unfamiliar. And then a voice. Low, male, smiling through the dark. You thought you'd erased all of us. She didn't move, because the final act was still writing itself. The footsteps grew louder beneath the tent's rafters, measured and familiar, like music from a long-lost duet. Vivian didn't flinch when the figure stepped into the light. Margot Delaney, still taller than most, though her spine bowed slightly now with time. Her once platinum curls were clipped close and silvering at the temples. But the smirk, half defiant, half amused, was exactly the same. Vivian folded her arms. I thought you swore off tents. Margot shrugged, stepping forward. I swore off fools, not the fabric. They looked at each other for a moment too long, past memory, past betrayal, past all the things that didn't get said when a partnership ends mid-fall. Then Margot held up a slim briefcase. I brought terms. Vivian arched an eyebrow. You came to negotiate? I came to invest, Margot said. I've been following everything, quietly, and I have a check with 7 digits and a note that says, let the kids fly. Vivian blinked. I want to co-fund a youth program for under-resourced talent, no legacy required. Vivian stepped forward and took the case. I'll match it. Margot smiled. You always did like symmetry. 2 weeks later, the big tent looked different, not just cleaned but reimagined. The aerial hoops were lowered to child height. Chalk lines marked practice grids on the sawdust floor. The old bleachers were padded with foam, and retired harnesses had been repaired with neon thread. Vivian walked the perimeter, clipboard in hand, as Camila followed behind, pointing things out. We've got our first cohort registered. Kids from Miami, Tallahassee, and Baton Rouge, ages 11 to 16. Fully sponsored. And the instructors? Vivian asked. Camila smiled wide. That's the best part. From the far corner of the tent came a whistle. 3 retired performers stood shoulder to shoulder. Hal the human coil, Esteban the wire dancer, and Gertie Flynn, who once performed a triple trapeze flip at age 62. All gray-haired, all grinning, Camila beamed. They're teaching the next act. Vivian turned to Margot, who had just entered, stilettos clicking against the polished wood of the old center ring. You think they'll keep up? Margot popped a cherry lozenge into her mouth. They're retired, not expired. At Daniel's office, paperwork scattered across the table like puzzle pieces. He slid the last page forward. Sign here, he said. And it's official. The Marcelli Legacy Cooperative becomes not just a performance institution, but a certified mentorship academy. With you and Camila listed as permanent board trustees. Vivian clicked the pen and paused. Leo would have hated this name, she said. Daniel chuckled. Then it's probably the right one. She signed. The gala sold out in 6 minutes. A one-night-only revival performance inside the original tent, broadcast statewide and streamed online to over 250,000 viewers. Rows of red and gold folding chairs shimmered under spotlights. Former cast members, now stage parents, retirees, and Broadway choreographers returned to stand along the outer ring. At the end of the show, the lights dimmed. A hush fell. Vivian walked center stage, dressed not in her ringmaster suit, but in sleek black pants, pearl-studded cuffs, and a silk scarf the color of sunrise. She took the mic, breath calm. We built this tent out of borrowed rope and stubbornness. We made art from dust. We caught each other before the fall until we didn't. She turned to where Margot stood just outside the spotlight. But the truth about legacy is it's not what you leave behind, it's what you reach back to lift. Margot stepped into the light, envelope in hand. She passed it to Vivian with a nod. A full endowment, Margot announced. And one stipulation, every performer under 18 gets mentorship, not management. Applause erupted. Vivian pulled her close for a tight hug. Confetti cannons fired from either side of the ring. Above them, the tent glowed like a cathedral. Backstage, as the crowd poured out and tech scrambled to reset, Luca handed Vivian a manila folder. Something came in through the co-op tip line. You should see it. She opened it. Inside, a copy of a contract, one signed by Leo in 1992 with an unknown investor. The clause was circled in red. All proprietary routines developed under the Marcelli name revert to silent partners after 35 years. Vivian's heart sank. 35 years, it was 2027. And someone was about to call in a debt they never earned. The courtroom was colder than usual. Not just the air, the energy. It crackled with the quiet voltage of an ending taking shape. Vivian sat still in her seat, red blazer buttoned, glasses low on her nose, the manila folder from the co-op tip line beside her. Daniel was already at the table, laptop open, tabs lined up like dominoes ready to fall. The opposing counsel was younger, polished, the kind of man who thought charm could outpace evidence. He approached the bench with a smile and a sheaf of papers. Your Honor, we submit this clause from 1992, granting creative reversion rights to an undisclosed investment party, our client's predecessor. Per the 35-year clause, proprietary ownership reverts to that entity this year. The judge, middle-aged and tired of spectacle, adjusted his bifocals. And your client today is Vanguard Performance Trust. Acquired the contract through an M&A deal with the original investor in 2018. Vivian didn't blink. Daniel stood slowly. Your Honor, we'd like to counterfile on grounds of concealed coercion, digital misrepresentation, and fraudulent contract renewal attempts. The judge raised an eyebrow. Proceed. Daniel clicked his remote. A slide lit up the courtroom monitor. Marcelli's signature, e-contract submission, IP mismatch, timestamp falsified, routed through VPN in Zurich. This isn't just a contract artifact, Daniel said, voice steady. It's a fabrication. And we have testimony to prove how the system was manipulated from the inside. He turned. Luca stepped forward. He wore a blazer that still hung a little awkward on his lanky frame, but his eyes held fire. Please raise your right hand, the clerk said. He did. Do you swear to tell the truth? I do. Daniel nodded. Can you describe what Eli told you in May of last year? Luca's voice didn't waver. He said the documents would be handled digitally, like Nana always forgets to, and that if the e-signature didn't match, he'd just spoof it through the usual way. He laughed. I didn't. The opposing counsel objected. The judge overruled. Did he mention why he was doing this? Luca hesitated. Then he said he was done waiting, that if Vivian wouldn't hand it over, he'd take it anyway. A few people in the gallery audibly gasped. Daniel clicked again. Slide 2, a chain of bank transfers, all routed through Shell LLCs, including one linked to Vanguard Performance Trust. We followed the money, he said, and it didn't just lead to the clause, it led to Eli. To a long-term plan designed to rewrite the Marcelli legacy through deception, not succession. The judge leaned back, silent for a long moment. Then he closed the folder in front of him. My ruling is as follows. The 1992 clause is nullified under fraud. All proprietary and creative rights revert fully to Vivian Marcelli. Further, the Marcelli Legacy Cooperative is recognized as sole legal owner of the brand, assets, and intellectual property therein. Vivian inhaled quietly. As for Mr. Eli Marcelli, the judge continued, this court finds sufficient evidence to impose penalties for digital fraud, contract tampering, and financial misconduct under civil statute. You are fined $350,000 and sentenced to 6 months community restitution, specifically at the Sarasota Lakeside Senior Center. There were chuckles in the gallery. Even the bailiff smirked. Eli, seated behind his counsel, clenched his jaw but said nothing. Vivian stood slowly, adjusting the cuff of her sleeve. Your Honor, she said, may I make a final statement? Briefly. She stepped forward, voice low but firm. You know, people think clowns are foolish. Painted faces, silly shoes, laughable. But the thing about clowns is, they're the smartest ones in the ring. They take the hits. They steal the show. And most of all, she looked at Eli. They never stop watching. She turned to the court. I may have worn pearls, but I never dropped the red nose. The judge nodded. Court adjourned. Outside, the flashbulbs felt warmer than they had any right to. Camila stepped beside Vivian, holding a fresh copy of the ruling. It's done. Vivian nodded once. Almost. Luca caught up, holding his phone. I checked Vanguard's registration history. Vivian glanced sideways. And? His face tightened. Margot's name is on the board. Vivian didn't stop walking, but her hand slowly curled into a fist inside her coat pocket. Because betrayal, no matter how late, still landed center ring. The canvas glowed golden under the spotlight. Ring dust swirling like glitter in slow motion. The house was full, sold out for weeks. A special engagement. One night only. Vivian stood just outside the curtain, her hands steady at her sides. Her costume was the original cut, blood-red jacket, gold-lined seams, soft epaulettes at the shoulders. But this version had been remade from finer material. Not flashier, truer. Camila walked up, a headset dangling from her collar. You don't have to go out there. You've done enough. Vivian smoothed a wrinkle from her sleeve. That's exactly why I do. She stepped through the curtain. No music, no announcement, just her. She walked slowly, each footfall deliberate. Not a march, not a strut, just presence. Her shoulders were square, her gaze direct. She made a full, silent circle of the ring. No flare, no bow. A final orbit around the heart she'd never stopped guarding. Then she stopped dead center and looked up. The lights tilted gently downward like they knew her name. From the lighting rig above, Luca watched her through the lens of the Q camera. His voice crackled over the mic into the house speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, family and friends, this is not the end of an act. It's the beginning of the truth. He paused. In this ring, we've learned that legacy is earned, not inherited. Applause started slow, then built. Below, Camila stood with Margot in the front row, arms wrapped around each other's shoulders. Behind them, the first class of student performers lined up in matching jackets, wide-eyed and beaming. Spotlights swept across their faces, pausing on the faces of Gertie, Hal, Esteban, all the legends who returned, not for money, but meaning. Backstage, Daniel stood beside a folding table, littered with confetti and cue cards. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a slim envelope, walking toward the ring just as the lights began their final fade. Vivian met him at the edge. No headlines, no ceremony, he said quietly. But this is yours. Your full royalties from the settlement, minus legal fees and some icing. She opened it. The amount was more than she expected. She looked up, unsmiling. Half goes to the mentorship endowment. Put the rest in discretionary reserve. These kids are going to need parachutes they never see coming. Daniel gave a small bow. Understood. The applause didn't stop. 5 minutes. Standing. No one left. Not even the donors in velvet. Not even the kids whose phones buzzed in their pockets. Because this wasn't just a tribute. It was a benediction. Later, the tent emptied, and the stage lights dimmed to moonlight. Vivian returned to the ring alone. The only sound was the zipper of a gear bag in the distance, the faint squeak of a winch being lowered. She crouched slightly and pressed her palm to the center. Same dirt, same weight, a lifetime looped in sawdust. Behind her, soft steps. She turned. It was Margot. No smile this time, just something quieter. Regret in silk gloves. I didn't sign that clause for revenge, Margot said. I thought I could protect what we built from Li. From what came after. Vivian nodded once. And then you protected it from me. A pause. Margot's voice broke slightly. I didn't trust you to stay standing. I was born standing, Vivian said. They stood there, two shadows from the same legacy, cast against different angles. Vivian didn't ask for an apology. Margot didn't offer one, but they stayed in that silence, because some endings don't need punctuation. From a distance, Camila watched them through the flap. Arms crossed, brow furrowed. Luca stepped beside her. You think she forgives her? Camila exhaled. I think she forgave herself first. They turned back toward the flickering tent. Let's get these kids to bed, Camila said. Then what? Camila looked skyward. Then we train them to fly. Vivian stood alone in the ring again. She looked up and saw a new banner, still catching its breeze. The Marcelli Legacy Cooperative, where the net is shared, but beneath it, in smaller gold lettering, Founding Ringmaster, VM, she smiled. Then the lights flickered once, and the curtain rustled again, because something else, someone else was coming through. But not from the past, from the future. The tent was quieter now, hushed, reverent, like it knew this was goodbye. Vivian walked slowly along the outer ring, fingertips grazing the canvas walls, eyes tracing every hand-stitched seam. The lights above flickered in rhythm, not malfunctioning but breathing. She passed the costume racks, now filled with sizes too small for her hands to mend, but not her heart to hold. The scent of chalk dust, hairspray, and hot sugar still lingered, just faint enough to feel like memory. At center ring, she stopped. This had always been the spot, not the highest platform, not the flashiest act, but the core. She exhaled. From the wings, Luca emerged. He carried a clipboard, 2 radios, and the frantic energy of a man trying to manage too much gracefully. Vivian reached into her coat and pulled out something wrapped in velvet. "Hold out your hand," she said. Luca blinked, then obeyed. She placed the baton in his palm. Red lacquered wood. Gold cap, worn smooth at the grip. "The original," she said. "No replicas, no backups." Luca stared down at it. "You want me to have it. I want you to guard it," she said. "With intention, with memory, and with enough bite to scare anyone who tries to take it again." He nodded, throat tight. Vivian touched his cheek once. A whisper of a gesture. "Don't forget, being the ringmaster means knowing when not to speak." That evening, Camila raised a flute of cider beneath the open night sky. Performers and board members circled around picnic tables. Laughter bright under string lights. She tapped the glass once. To the woman who never missed her mark. A cheer went up. To the woman who stitched her power into velvet. More cheers. To the woman who reminded us, falling doesn't mean failing. Vivian, seated on a folding chair with a blanket over her knees, just smiled and raised her cup. Later, alone in her bungalow, Vivian lit a small lamp beside her desk. The same one she used when Leo would pace during tax season. She opened her old leather planner. The pages were soft from years of scribbles, call times, payroll notes, and routines. She turned to the back. Blank. Then slowly, with her fountain pen, she wrote 3 words. "The end, mine." At the Sarasota Lakeside Senior Center, Eli moved slowly down the hallway with a push broom in hand. His khakis sagged at the knees. His face was sunburned, unshaven. He paused by the community room, where a group of retirees were learning beginner line dancing from a patient young instructor. "Grab a chair if your knees are stubborn," the woman called. Eli stayed at the door, not watching, just staying. Silent, for once. Back at the circus grounds, children rehearsed on the smaller practice stage. Laughter broke out as one dropped a baton mid-spin, and another tried walking a low wire with arms too stiff. Vivian sat beneath a striped awning, sipping her tea, watching with no critique, just awe. Camila joined her, folding into the chair beside her. "No headlines today," she said. Vivian smiled. "Good. Let them rest." Daniel's final paperwork came through. "You're officially just founder now." Vivian nodded. "That's all I ever needed to be." A pause. Camila watched the kids, eyes soft. "You scared me once, you know, when you said it might be time to step back." Vivian stirred her tea. "Stepping back doesn't mean vanishing. It means making room." Luca jogged by with a walkie clipped to his belt, shouting something about a missing harness and a teenager who claimed her glitter was emergency grade. Vivian laughed and leaned back, because peace wasn't silence. It was watching something survive you and not crumble. A breeze rustled the curtains along the practice tent. A faint trace of sawdust kicked up. Vivian didn't rise. She didn't need to. She'd already made the final bow. And now, she simply watched. Then, as a group of students lined up for their finale cue, one whispered to another, "Is it true she used to walk the high wire in heels?" The second replied, "No, she ran it." Vivian smiled, finishing her tea, and whispered, "Just once, they made me the clown, but I owned the tent they danced in."